Hi friends, it's Pastor Harley from the Broadway Church, reading to you from the end of the Sermon on the Mount. You'll have to go back as we're reading through the Bible as a church. You'll have to read because last 2 days you would have had the Sermon on the Mount, Matthews 5, 6, and 7. The end of chapter 7 gives us this. And when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. Now, his teaching of authority is very much in something like this, where Jesus would say, well, you have heard it was said to the men of old, you shall not murder. But I tell you, you shall not even harbor anger against your brother. In other words, this is what was said. This was what was written. It was perhaps very well known, the commandments of Moses. I'm sure it was. And Jesus doesn't refer back to what was written. And the rabbis and the scribes and the Jewish teachers would base their authority and say, well, let me help you interpret these lines that were given to us by Moses, and let us tell you more about the interpretation of the interpretation. And believe me, as a Bible interpreter, I respect that. I love the writings of some of the rabbis, but Jesus is doing something different here. He is saying, I say to you. Why would he do that? He does that because he is the Son of God. He has come into the world as Messiah. If there was anything that Judaism, if there's anything that the faith of the Old Testament and the preaching of the prophets pointed to, is that they would one day meet this Messiah that God was going to send. In other words, in answer to the problem of human sinfulness, and answer to the problem that you might look around and say, I have no idea how I'm solving this in the world, in my family, or about myself. God has said he would come down and take a hand himself. That is Jesus doing that. And so Jesus is starting the kingdom. The whole emphasis being on the king is here. Jesus is teaching, saying, I say to you, not the words that were written for true, but this kingdom, this inward blessing of God, this inward dwelling of God's love in your heart. This is the new thing Jesus begins, and he wastes no time inaugurating it. May Jesus begin his work in you today. Amen.